I remember the day Hurricane Ike struck Texas and Louisiana back in 2008. It was Friday night, September 12, 2008, in Houston, Texas. I was 11 at the time, and my mom and dad were sitting in front of the TV watching as Ike crept closer towards Texas. My dad went to Walmart and got some dry food, flashlights, and batteries for the storm. I was really nervous because of the size of Ike, since it was 450 miles wide, and the damage it might cause overnight. I was walking around thinking the worst, and even taking a long last look at my apartment complex with my neighbor's friend. It started getting windy around 6 p.m., winds around 40 miles per hour, and we got scared and ran home. Twigs from the 100-foot pine trees started to break off, and leaves were flying everywhere. My mom and I were walking to Pop's supermarket to get some last-minute things, and the checkout line was very long. When we were finally done, the winds blew open the door, and everybody went silent. We went home quickly. Dad was in the bedroom with his hard hat on, playing with the flashlight as he watched the news. There was a phone bank with citizens asking questions to Dr. Neal about what kind of damage they could expect. I ran outside at 10 p.m., and the winds were still at 40 miles per hour, but they started to gust past 50, and I was on my porch, watching the palm tree near me sway in the wind. The tall pine trees were bending slightly as I heard them rustle in the wind. More leaves and trash were airborne now. I couldn't stand against the wind as I tried to go downstairs, and the wind kept pushing me back. I gave up and went back upstairs once my folks told me it's no longer safe to be wandering. The wind was howling at the back window. My dad managed to use an old bed to cover the window, and it was reinforced with the couch in his bedroom. I tried to fall asleep, but the wind was howling constantly, and gusts started to become a little more frequent. At around 11:30 p.m., it was getting blustery outside, and the lights started to flicker. We ran to the closet, but we started to fuss when my mom didn't want to get in. She was terrified, and we tried to calm her down, but another loud gust blew in, and the carport downstairs started rumbling. The wind was starting to make squealing and screeching noises. We were silent for a couple minutes, staring at the back window. I could see an outline of the trees whipping in the wind from the streetlight. Dad and I went inside, and Mom slept in the living room. For another 30 minutes, lights would flicker as we listened to Paul and Tom on the radio. I lay down on the floor, and Dad sat on his big toolbox playing with the flashlight. Around 12:30 a.m., we lost power, and the winds got louder. It sounded like a train one minute, and a wolf howling the next second. The winds were probably between 70 and 80 by that time. My dad went out to get my mom, but I remember my mom opening the door to look outside to get a peek. It was terrifying. In the sea of darkness, the palm tree was bending back and forth violently. Water was falling from the roofs like Niagara Falls. The giant pine trees were bending at 45-degree angles with branches snapping off. Mom closed the door and finally took refuge in the closet. She was crying at one point, and we told her we were going to make it out. At 1:30 a.m., the back window shattered and glass and rain started to come in. I flashed a light to help Dad see, and he had to get some trash bags to cover the TV and computer in his room and push the couch to push the beds that were covering the broken window back up, but the wind kept pushing them down. Around 2 o'clock a.m., the radio said Ike made landfall at Galveston and Houston, and the surrounding area was being battered by high winds and heavy surge flooding. Dad took note of the sky looking orange when we opened the closet door to let some cool air in, since it was hot inside the closet. I heard debris hitting the building, and the wind was deafening. The winds were above 75 miles per hour at that time. All night the wind was screaming. We spent 10 to 12 hours in the closet until noon Saturday. It was a mess outside. Shingles littered the floor, and tree branches and twigs were everywhere. My dad's old pair of shoes were still next to the door. The courtyard was even worse. Pine trees were snapped in half, and entire trees were down on the ground. I helped our neighbors clean up the debris and clear the pathways. Dad went to get more food and water. We ate what we could and had to walk around to find some food and hot water. Mom and Dad were upset, but glad we made it out unscathed. We walked around the neighborhood seeing the damage. A lot of tree damage and some leaning power lines. I couldn't sleep that Saturday night with all the humidity. My mom and I were listening to updates from the mayor and city officials. We were both scared out of wits, and I cried, but my mom reassured me that we made it and we are okay. By Sunday afternoon, the power was restored, and we started to learn about the true devastation Ike did to the state. I was thankful that we didn't lose our home or lives in that manner. Some areas along the coast were wrecked or wiped out from the storm surge. Watching the wreckage, it ran a chill down my spine, but it showed me the true power of these cyclones. These tropical cyclones are nothing to mess with. This is the story I will tell my kids one day. I used to live together with my boyfriend and my daughter in a sturdy building designed to withstand a Category 5 storm, the maximum. I was just out shopping together with my daughter when Hurricane Michael started to come. When I realized, I thought that the safest place where we could be was my apartment. When I was rushing in the chaos and the wet because of the hurricane swirling around me, it never occurred to me that the building was surrounded by trees and pines, which only brought more danger for me and my 3-year-old daughter. As I took shelter in a nearby building to my apartment, I couldn't help but notice how terrible the wind sounded, like the kind of monstrous roar you hear in a horror movie. When we finally made it home safely, I turned on the news as soon as possible. They told us to wait in our homes as it passed over Florida's northern panhandle region. Here comes the second part, I thought. First a tree fell, and then almost an hour went by of silence. We heard another huge noise, and the wind sent the tree crashing through the window into our bedroom. I was scared to death. Thankfully, me and my family were in another room. I had just come running out of the room 5 minutes before it happened. All I could think was, is this where it finally stops? My boyfriend and I tried to place towels and other objects to block the incoming rain, but it was futile. I fled to my mom's house, which is in Mexico Beach, but when I arrived, the water had reached the ceiling of my mom's damaged home in a district of beach towns that depend on tourism and fishing. I lost everything I have, I thought, but thank God we are still alive. Hurricane Michael made landfall Wednesday as a catastrophic Category 4 storm with winds of 155 miles per hour. When the eye of the storm reached Mexico Beach, 32 kilometers, 20 miles south of the larger Panama City, it was pouring so hard at some point that the rain was moving horizontally. Many brick buildings were partly collapsed. More trees were toppled than standing. Metal containers, pieces of roofing, satellite antennas, and stoplights all were strewn on the ground. As I and my boyfriend tried to stop the deluge, there was a new worry: whether the storm surge of rising waters would be as bad as the forecasters feared. If so, it could simply carry away what's left, I feared.